Hi, and welcome everybody. Thanks for making the time to join us today. This is the first webinar in our Practical Customer Success series, and we're very fortunate to welcome Paul Teshima today. Paul was one of the first employees at Eloqua, where he built a customer success organization literally from the ground up, from 0 to 100 people. After helping the company achieve a billion-dollar market cap, he made a successful exit to Oracle, and then went on to found Nudge, a social selling app. Paul is a recognized pioneer in customer success, and while at Eloqua, he developed a repeatable process of building and scaling customer success teams. And he was committed to garnering executive support for his organization by presenting measurable contributions to the company's bottom line. He's going to share this model with you today. Please use the questions section on the right, and Paul will take your questions at the end of the presentation. Throughout today's presentation, we'll also be tweeting live, so please follow the hashtag at Practical Customer Success. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Paul.
Thanks, Jody, and thanks everyone for attending today. Really excited to get to talk about what I learned in helping build a successful business using customer success as a key culture and strategic point for us at Eloqua. Before I begin, I'd like to ask the audience a few questions. How many of you are billable customer success managers and get paid for your services? How many of you have a quota, so receive commissions for upsells or cross-sells to your customer base? And how many have ever received a cape from a customer? Well, one of my CSMs, Heather Fay, did. And in fact, it was from one of our great customers, our New York Plum Benefits. The COO decided that Heather had done such a great job in helping them be successful in their use of marketing automation that they sent down a cape prior to one of our annual kickoffs. And really, that it is the epitome of a customer success person to achieve such great things with their customer. They do think of him or her as a hero. And that's really what we all try and do when we do this job. Now, just a little more background, as Jody went through, it was a 14-year journey at Eloqua, and we really spent a lot of time working on this customer success function, and there was a lot of trial and error. But ultimately, what I'd love to do today is take a step back and give you a sense of how to take this model and apply it to your organization. And what I did learn was that there are 4 stages a customer goes through in what we would like to call a customer success maturity model. And so I'm going to spend the time today to take you through each one of these stages and some best practices that we've learned to help make them work. And each one of these stages applies to a different stage of the customer. In fact, the way we've looked at the model is in the number of customers you have help sort of establish the stage that probably you're in. And so with that, before we jump into some of the content, I would like to start with the first poll question, a question that'll help us both see what the audience looks like and thinks about this, and also help me as I guide me through the rest of the content. And so the first poll is going to be, based on your number of customers, what stage of growth is your company in? So I'm going to launch this poll. If everyone could take time here just to indicate which one of these customer sets, 0 to 20, 20 to 100, 100 to 1,000, or more than 1,000 customers. And wow, everyone's voting pretty quickly. We're seeing a lot of different answers come in here. Almost there. And with that, why don't I go ahead and close off this poll and then publish the results here to everyone on the screen. So we're seeing that the majority of the people on the webinar here have 100 to 1,000 customers, which is great, which means that we're seeing some of the businesses here have gotten to that stage where you're really trying to figure out how to scale the business beyond just individual sort of help and key roles. Also seeing some of the customers here are just starting, and a few are really in that product market fit stage. So the first stage of sort of the customer success maturity model is really this idea of getting to product market fit, and that's really when you're under 20 customers. And with that, I'm going to tell you that I don't think you need a dedicated customer success manager, and I'll talk about why in a second. And so this sort of, you're going to see this grid here time and time again throughout the webinar, because it really is sort of the anchor of all the things that we're going to talk about at each of these stages. And so don't think you need a customer success person. So therefore, some of the other things don't apply. You probably have some sort of CRM system that you're using to track any customers or any data around customers, and no account managers because everybody's trying to help sell and get product market fit with your product. And one of the reasons I don't think you need a CSM is that there are many different areas of the market that you can help, and many different roles that can help drive customer success. And if you look at the sort of 2x2 grid, there are certainly some solutions where user experience may be a better primary driver of customer success than the role itself. Or maybe in an advanced, very complex market that is mature, you're going to see professional services really take on that role where you can actually charge. And we eventually got to that place at Eloqua where a lot of our services were actually charged for. And so it's not always that every market needs this role, but what we're seeing is that this role can have tremendous impact in the success of your business. And so what I ask of you at this stage is think about all the things that you can do to help drive success for your customers, whether it's focusing on the product, training or support, or starting to think about this, the customer success manager themselves. And if you need help thinking about, well, how do I go about getting a business case together, or thinking about setting the scale for the next phase of the journey, there's a great business case for customer success white paper that's been put out by Amity that really goes through the key things you need to do to quantify those benefits. And it's something I would say that every customer or every sort of person on this phone should start doing if you're at this stage now. The other thing you'll find out in this first phase is that a lot of it is sort of the Oliver Twist model of beg, borrow, and steal. You're really trying to solve problems here. You're running around a bit, and you're always asking to have more resources. And that's actually a good thing. That's a good place to be, because what it is, it's forcing you to be disciplined around only asking for resources when you absolutely need them. And therefore, you start to figure out where then this customer success position really lives in your business. So in the first stage, then, there's some takeaways here. First off, ensure you look at all the factors to drive product engagement, not just the CSM itself. Start building that business case with what you have, and make sure that every customer, you're focused 100%, you're doing whatever it takes to make them successful. And as I mentioned, maybe don't hire a CSM just yet. So now we're on to the second stage, and I have another poll question here for the audience. And this one is, do you currently have a customer success platform? So let me put that one up here and launch that poll and see what some of the answers here. If everyone can take give a quick answer here on this one. Okay, interesting here. Let me this one is answered pretty quickly here. Let me close off this poll here and share the results. It's pretty even. There's a lot of customers here who have a customer success platform and a bunch that don't. And maybe some of them would say their CRM is, and maybe some would say, oh, it's something else. But one thing that has changed since I did this role and I ran this team is that there are now a whole breed of new platforms that actually focus on this real discipline, which is really, really interesting. So in this second stage, it's really about how do we make this work and drive real value for our customers? And so you're in that 20 to 100 customer range, and there's going to be some things that we learned at Eloqua that I want to talk to you about. And one of the first ones for us is this idea that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And lots of people talk about business culture and how important it is. Not a lot of people talk about how you go about instead building that culture that you care about. And certainly we've all seen this at businesses we've been at. You could have the best strategy in the world, the executives have the clearest vision, but if your culture doesn't support it, you can never execute against that strategy. And so we learned this at Eloqua, that it was going to be really important for us to focus on customer success, and I'll tell you how it came about. But before I do that, let's take a quick look at the maturity model again, because in this stage, I think it is appropriate to have a CSM, some dedicated CSMs. They're absolutely focused on product engagement. You're going to look at a compensation that incentivizes them, not just for things that they care about directly, renewals and NPS or customer sat, but also ties them back to the corporate goals. And I think that's really important. And just so I'm clear, a CSM is different than sales. Like, this looks like a fairly complex, sort of three-tiered model on variable comp. But really what you're sending is a message that half of your job should still make sure you hit the corporate goals, but half can be stuff that you can control around renewals and NPS. And you're going to see systems like CRM, and again, I will strongly advocate for getting a customer success platform in early, and I'll tell you a bit about why I think that a little later in this section. And at this time, you probably don't have an account manager because there's no real opportunity to cross-sell. Now, let's go over the anatomy of a great CSM. And I think because this role is getting harder and harder to find, although getting more and more defined, I think, as the market matures. And really, I found that the best CSMs had a combination of four qualities. The first was that they are naturally curious. They have an innate ability. It may be they've had a long week. They're shutting it down on Friday after a few social beers with the team, and then some at 10 o'clock at night they ping me because they're interested in something a customer is doing, and they go that extra mile to figure it out. They're optimistic but cynical, and what I mean by that is they believe every single one of their customers can be successful down the road, but they know that there are going to be lots of challenges along the way. And so that creates an ability to see those challenges and help a customer navigate through them. They have domain. They understand the space they're in. For us, it was all about marketing and marketing automation and digital marketing. And that was really important to get credibility with the customers. And then the last, but certainly not the least important, is they are great at storytelling. And I'm going to get into a little more detail about why that's important. So in the earlier days in this phase at Eloqua, we actually had a ritual called Club SM, which was really an opportunity to get together once a month as a team, have some beers, talk a bit about what happened that month, and play a fun game. And one of my favorites was one we're showing here, which was Iron Chef pizza combos from the vending machines. So you had to come up with an interesting dish using these pizza combos. And so we did these games once a month, and it was great, and we talked about the business. One of the challenges was that as the team got bigger, these events got harder and harder to, simply manage. As it get to 20, 30, 40 people, it was a full-time job just to kind of set up and run this event. And so what I said and what to the team was, we're going to have to cut this back. This is really just going to be about talking about, things that happened in the month because we don't have time to run the event. And so I thought the attendance would die off. What actually happened is that more people came to the event when we just talked about stories at the customer. And what I realized was two things. One, people loved hearing those stories because it really represented what we were doing in the space and how we were helping customers. And the best ones were memorable. So they could use those same stories to go talk to their customer about why they should also be doing what X, Y, and Z customer did over here. And then two, they became infectious and people said, wait a second, I don't want to just tell someone else's story. I want to tell my own story. So they went out and tried to find out, how do I make a customer successful? How do I make these incredible stories happen in my own customer base? And, I will say there's some great books and papers and blog posts on how to be a great storyteller. One that I look at a lot is Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath. I'm not going to go through this methodology, but certainly one that applies. But this sort of idea of storytelling around customer success was critical to driving the culture for us. And it became so popular that eventually we professionalized it in the forms of something we called the Marquees, which were an annual event where the customer stories that we learned, we gave awards for. And at the end, when I left Eloqua, we had 1,600 people attended. It was a black tie affair, 22 categories of excellence in marketing. And there were literally, some companies sent up to 20 to 30 people because it was such a great event to showcase the power of great marketing. So storytelling was critical in this phase for us in building that culture of customer success, as well as finding the right people. But one thing that I think was also important is putting together a system of record, a platform for customer success. Now, for us back then, it was a hodgepodge of systems, which made it very difficult. But one of the questions I sometimes get is, well, why would I do that now, Paul? Why do I need to invest in that platform now? Is that important? And I will always tell them, I think it's very important. And the reason is that sales, in the world of sales, where they have a system of record, their CRM and sales automation, they live on a quarterly cadence. So they, every quarter they do stuff, and some have moved to a monthly cadence in some companies I know. But customer success typically lives in a year or an annual cadence because you look about renewals. And so you can't wait. You have to start now because pretty soon your renewal's coming up and you need that history, you need those interactions, you need to focus on improving those customers' experience early to affect that annual renewal. And so that's one of the reasons I think it's really important to invest now. So some of the takeaways from this session are: first, if you want a culture on customer success, start a storytelling session. It can be something as simple as we did once a month. Um, Make sure you have someone who helps moderate it and chooses people, not always the same people, but force that process to happen. I think you've got to look for those skills I talked about, but also hire someone who's motivated to be in that role, and then start implementing key customer success practices um, now on a platform so that you can impact the future growth you're going to need in the next phase of the model. A couple things I learned not to do. First is getting account managers involved too early when you're still focusing on engaging and driving value. So it's all really about understanding the product and the customer's business. And then certainly, if those first few CSMs, do not let them become tier one support. Very easy to, because the customer calls them a lot. They bypass the support line. Do not let them become tier one support. Make sure you train them really well on passing that back to support so you can focus them on some of the higher value activities with their customers. Now, here is the next poll question. And we're going to get into this third phase, which I really think it starts to get interesting around scaling. And certainly there's a large portion of the people attending this webinar in this phase. And this next poll is: do you segment customers? Do you segment your customers for customer success management purposes? Let's launch that poll. So in other words, do you take your entire customer base and actually break them up into segments? Let's see what people are answering here. All right, the results are coming in. Oh, and look, it looks like there's a lot of people saying yes, which is very interesting and good if you're at this stage. So let me close off this poll here and share the results. So it looks like 3/4 of the audience here segments their customers for the CSM purposes, which is great and something I would say is really important to learn how to scale. And I'm going to talk a bit about why in this section. So for me, when you're thinking about going from 100 to 1,000 customers and scaling and learning how to scale your organization, your business, you need to think about the CSM role as moving from how things work for the customer to what's next. And that's going to be difficult. Most CSMs I've worked with, natural tendency is to help customers with the how and stay there, because it's all about the product. It's all about getting them to use what they've bought and using it well. It's certainly about telling stories from other customers and how they're using the product or service. What's next adds more risk to the equation. It's well, what should I be doing now with my marketing organization since now I have this new platforms up and running? Are there any roles I should be looking at? Right? Are there any new initiatives I should be doing in my marketing that could take advantage of the technology we've put in? And so, but this transformation is important because you need to get your customers to that next level, and you need to move away from being as involved in the product to really scale this part of the org. So as I look at this section of the customer success maturity model, it really is about learning to scale. You're going to have more CSMs. I would still say it's in the single digits, although I've seen some organizations with larger numbers than this. It's a focus on value adoption. I'll tell you, value adoption for me is a little different than proving value, because you prove value kind of in a hindsight way. You look back and you say, did we have an ROI and what we invested in? It's about taking value every cycle within the org and improving what you're doing. So it could be a weekly cadence, a monthly cadence, but you're using the system in a way to improve your business day in and day out. We're going to see a shift in this area, this stage, where now CSMs can start earning commission on upsells. And I think it's important to pay them. I think it shouldn't be paid to an account manager, and I'll explain why in a bit. And I think it can help really drive some rock stars out of the organization that are going to really impact your ability to grow. I think you're also going to see marketing getting involved now in a marketing system at some point, because this is where cross-sell upsell starts to becoming important, and you can't do it alone just on picking up the phone. You're going to have AMs involved, so there's another person who's going to be talking to the customer, and is going to cause some tension, and they're going to be paid on upsells, cross-sells, I should say. And I'll explain the difference between cross-sells and upsells in a couple of slides. So we talked a bit about segmenting your customer base, and I'm going to show you a segmentation that we ended up post 1,000 customers that for me was really, really helpful. And what we decided is that there were 4 types of customers in our customer base, and we couldn't treat them all the same, not only for our business, but for their business as well. And so let's start sort of in the top left, the enterprise. So everyone knows this customer, you have them. They are paying you a lot of money, but they're not going to pay you that much more money. You kind of did a great job at the start. You did a big sale. They have a complex environment, and you best never lose them. Okay, and so what we decided there was we're going to give you a named CSM, but we're also going to give you a technical account manager, someone who can help navigate the complex IT environment and data flows and things that are happening in that multi-divisional enterprise. And your goal in this scenario is to just keep renewing them. Yeah, maybe you get a 10%, 15% lift, but keep renewing them and not lose the core business. If you look at the bottom right, on the nurture segment, we called it, this is a group of customers where you could potentially grow. There's a lot of opportunity to grow their account with you, but it isn't going to be as big as an enterprise. And so for that, we had an account manager, because there's a lot of keeping the sort of selling aspect involved there. A pool of the CSMs, because the accounts weren't big enough yet to put a dedicated role on there. But the account manager could decide and say, yeah, I need this person for this period of time to help me with this issue or this challenge or this opportunity with the customer. And then in the top right, we had our strategic segment. So these are accounts that not only were pretty big to start, but they could grow 10-fold, 20-fold. And so not only did we have a named CSM, but they needed a real salesperson on that account, because it required constant vigilance, constant work at the executive champion level to continue to drive value forward through the multi-divisional organization. And then at the bottom left, our Accelerate group, smaller customers, valuable customers, but never going to really grow. And so what we did was we provided them only a CSM to onboard for the first 10 weeks. Now, we did not get to this 2x2 overnight, and certainly there was some trial and error, but for those of you on the call at this stage, it's a great way to think about where you may want to end up post 1,000 customers. Okay. Now, in this stage, another thing happens, and I've talked to a lot of very, very smart and driven customer success leaders over the last couple of years, and one of the things they always come to me and say is, Paul, you know what? All these people are taking my CSM's time. How are they ever supposed to do their job? Sales wants them on sales calls. Product wants them to help them with product stuff and roadmap. Marketing wants them to talk at these events and help run things. And I say to them, that's a good thing. If your CSMs are being pulled left, right, and center, it means they're doing their job right. It means they know the customer, they know the product, they can add value to sales. All those things are really good. And so that tension is going to be there. And your CSMs who aren't good at saying no, because that's what their job is, not to say no all the time, are going to have a hard time. And so you got to really watch this tension. You may even lose a couple CSMs through this process. But what will start to happen is there'll be an opportunity to have a CSM move to another area of the business. I strongly advise you not to fight that problem. So the best thing I ever did after I got over myself was to let some CSMs go into sales, go into product, go into service, go into marketing, because now you have someone who's spent years understanding the customer, the value prop in an area of the organization where they probably aren't as tight with the customer. And that was a tremendous win for the business overall. And then continued to let us hire, as my CEO said, wow, some of the best people are coming from this org. Let's hire ahead in CSM so that if some do leave, we don't have to worry about backfilling all the time. And so it was a great way for me to stay ahead of the hiring curve in that group. Now, I'm going to walk you through the life cycle part of this stage. And so I talked a bit about segmentation. I talked about the role. Let's walk through some stages of how we think about the life cycle part, which is really all about scaling. Because if you can figure out your customer life cycle and map it out and automate as much of the interaction as possible, you can scale. And there's a great quote here, which is, few races are won at the start, but many races are lost. And I think that there's one thing I would have done differently at Eloqua, which is focused less on renewal and more on onboarding. Okay, and it took us a while to get there, but eventually we actually had a really disciplined process around onboarding. We called it the watch list. It was a CEO level report. I would sit with my CEO once a week and show him who's in red, who's in yellow, who's in green, regardless if it was delivered by a direct service team or our partner service ecosystem. And what it did was two things. Obviously, it fixes problems up front. And everyone knows that if you fix a problem at the start versus wait 3 months, the chances of them renewing go up an order of magnitude. The second is that it starts holding some of these other groups accountable to customer success. It's not just about selling a deal and moving on. It's about, wait, what's happening now in the first 30 days? Did you overcommit on something that we can't do in the product? It's holding partners accountable because they're now realizing that they're getting CEO level visibility on their implementations. And so this watch list, although challenging to continue to drive forward because it's not something that's typically done, was really important for us as the starting phase. The next thing we did was put together an actual success plan, a multi-stage ladder that looked at your first 3 months, next quarter, and then last quarter in the first year, and then what types of product areas are important based on the business needs that we've seen. And this became not only something that we used every quarter with our customers, but it became a selling tool to executives who were worried that if they bought Eloqua, that their team wouldn't actually get the value because they wouldn't be able to deliver. They didn't know what they were going to do next. And so this plan was a critical backbone for the customer success lifecycle that we ended up landing on. We used, of course, a community to support users. That was a great way to scale, and certainly something I would advise everyone to focus on. And we called it topliners, and it was a great way not only for support to provide value and for our customers, but CSMs interacting there again was another way to scale. And then in the last stage, something that I think always gets asked is the show me the money part. So yes, we're doing all this work, but where's the extra money from customers? Where's the upsell? Where's the cross-sell? And so before I get into that aspect, which I think is one of the biggest friction points, let me ask another poll, and this will be the final poll here today, and that is, do your customer success managers get compensated for upsells and renewals? If I can put that up there, I'd love to see what the results are on that poll. All right, let's close off this poll here and publish the results. So a little different than I thought, actually. I would say 2/3 no compensation, 1/3 getting 40% getting compensated, and I guess we put upsells and renewals together. Maybe some are just on renewals. I'll talk a bit why this is interesting to me because I think there is a challenge because account managers need to be paid for selling accounts, but I think there's a benefit to the customer in sort of paying the CSMs, and I'll explain why in a second. So as we go to this next slide, the first thing I want to do is define what I would say is the difference between an upsell and cross-sell. And I've heard this time and time again, not only as we did the work, but as I've talked to SVPs of sales and whether or not you can really hire an account management team or not. So upsells to me, and we did this at Eloqua a lot, is all about an initial sale that can then drive incremental value, incremental sales through, say, more of the original pricing protocol. For us, that was the size of the database. Or maybe there's some add-ons that, we're talking 20, 30% of the initial deal at most. And so that to me is all about driving usage and engagement with your platform, showing value, and then the upsells are not that difficult. It's more, it's more about order taking if you do those first two things. A cross-sell is different. A cross-sell is where you take your existing product and you either take that same product and sell it to other groups that needs actually a full sales cycle to get it done, or at least almost a full sales cycle to get that deal done, or you're selling that same customer a completely different product. Now at Eloqua, we really only had one prime product. So really it was about the divisional sale for us, and that's much more about value in selling. And I think those are two very different types of people who can do those scenarios. And I think because of cloud and SaaS, the first one really is driven a lot by usage and value. So to go do that, what we did was we wanted to find hunters that may have been good salespeople, but were actually better at farming. And some of those people existed in our sales organization and became farmers. And they actually did even better because they had both an ability to sell, but they had an ability to also understand and be intimate with the customer, which was really important. And so our ideal customer lifecycle, as I've gone through those stages, look like this. We had that real focus on onboarding. We had a really focused effort around making sure they were set up correctly. And then that first 30 to 60 days, there was a lot of support from both the CSMs, our training, and our support organizations. And then we looked to scale that out through the community up into an annual review. And so this life cycle for us was really important. And again, as I mentioned at the time, we didn't really have a platform to put this in. Which created a lot of challenges. Some of it lived in CRM, some of it lived in spreadsheets, some of it lived in our own marketing engine. And so it wasn't as easy to make sure that we were following this process day in and day out. And so customers slipped through the cracks. Another thing I'll mention at this stage, which can be really challenging, is you have a lot of customers, right? And as the head of customer success, I couldn't keep track of all of them. What you really want to avoid, which will derail some scaling here, is what I call the sample of one, or the hallway conversation with the CEO. My CEO may have taken a trip down to San Francisco, met with one big customer. I didn't know that was happening. They hear something's going wrong. I bump into him in the hallway, and that's the problem. There's no way we're doing this right. What are the CSMs doing? These customers are really unhappy, and obviously this role isn't working. So maybe we're not going to hire anymore for the next little while. And so it's the sample of one issue that you really need to avoid, because it's hard to recover from that in a way that allows you to scale. And so one of the ways I did that, and one of the ways I really advocate, is by focusing, just like a sales VP manages up on pipeline. You wanted the same thing on your customer lifecycle, on your customer health. And so what you really need is a dashboard of standard metrics that you can show to your executives on a regular basis. And this is a great screenshot of one out of the Amity system, which I really love because it's very straightforward. What's the health of the customer? Are there any insights like low activity? What's the MRR? I mean, very important. And when are they renewing? And then what's the last time they've been active? It can be that simple, but you'd be surprised how hard it is to do that unless you have a platform behind it. And so that process where we did the dashboard cadence with my executive team was really critical in establishing control of the cadence, control of the sample of one issue, and allowed us to continue to scale through this phase. And to sort of case in point here, I was at a board meeting towards the very end of pre-IPO sort of Eloqua's time, and I had this report that I used to show, which was the NPS score, and it was, as you can see, luckily it was up and to the right. And I remember one of our board members said to me, Paul, I don't think there's any other organization that has had as much impact on the business as yours. And I'm not saying that to pat myself in the back. There are many people who helped make that happen. It's really to focus on two things. One is, if we hadn't been tracking this in some sort of platform or system of record, we wouldn't have that view. And two, as you can see, sometimes customer success takes longer to see that output. And so you need to start early. You can't wait. This is over a 3-year span you're seeing this trend, going probably from 100 to 1,000 customers. And so the takeaways of this section really are all about: map your customer product value lifecycle, put pressure on other groups to do their part. That's that early watch list I talked about, and develop a customer success cadence with your executive team. Don't stop leaving CSMs. That's a double negative. So I'll just make sure I'm clear. Let CSMs, or don't stop them from leaving to other roles. And then don't hire AMs without domain and product knowledge. So go to your current sales team. There could be some farmers in there that really are better farmers than hunters. All right. now we're on to the last section, and if you've made it to 1,000+ customers, and I did see there were some who were in this section, that's great. But as you all know, the numbers are bigger, and as my CFO used to always say, where's the growth of the growth? It's not fine just to grow at $10 million on 40. You got to keep that 30 or 40% growth even as your base gets bigger. And so it's all about what I would call faster, better, cheaper. Where can I get more from our customers? How can we do it more at scale? And although I probably mentioned or in the earlier invites to this webinar, there's going to be no math here. There's going to be a little bit of math just so you understand how this all works. So the first is that if you look at some great data from Pacific Crest SaaS benchmark report, the not as you grow in revenue. So if you go from all the way to a little over 2 million to north of 40 million, you're going to see that for customers that are doing businesses that are doing well, they're taking more and more from cross sell and upsell from their customer base. It's all the way up to the difference between people who are growing slower versus higher is 11%. 33% revenue coming from the customer base versus 23 separates top growing companies. And so this idea of using your customer base to help get more revenue because it's a lower cost is important. The second is the cost to renew and upsell is typically 5 times lower than new. Why? Because you don't have to spend all that money on marketing and on salespeople to get that lift. And it dramatically changes your ability to drive profitable revenue. And then finally, one of the things I think is a challenge is that the current average sales price is lower than it's ever been. It's going down, it's about $20,000. And so this gets again more into the idea, as mentioned before, is that you don't need an account manager to sell an additional $4,000 on ACV, right? But as you grow that base and have more products, it makes sense. So all in all, upsells is critical to growing businesses at scale. And you really should compensate CSMs because that's really their work that's driving those additional incremental spend. It's really the value and the usage engagement. And let me give you some practical examples of how that worked for us, just so you can understand the effect. We signed on a company like American Express, and over 3 years through multi-divisional sales, we grew that account 2,600%. McGraw-Hill over 700% over 5 years. That type of growth not only was fantastic for the business, but exciting to attract great account managers and great CSMs because it really meant a lot of upside for them as well. So that really is the last column here about growing the base better, faster, better, cheaper. At this point, you really should be in a by segment model for customer base. Your CSMs have moved already to the what next. They're in that best practice. They're probably being asked to speak. They're being involved a lot more in marketing, being more strategic. They are still getting compensating similarly. I always love to see the upsell piece because that gives them that extra incentive. And if you get to this sort of level of seniority, you want to provide them the ability to earn more comp. And you're going to have account managers layered on top of them doing the right things on cross-sell. And so I'm going to show you an ancient slide here. This is my original slide of where we ended up, what the machine looked like when we got to this stage. And so it was really all about 3 phases of the customer lifecycle: implementation, ongoing adoption, and growth. We had different roles involved at different stages. We had different processes. So we had, this thing called the service watch list for that onboarding part. We had a success ladder that drove them through product adoption and engagement. And then we had an attrition watch list on the back end, something that probably you already have to some level. It's the one that usually gets put first. And then we had multiple systems. And this was probably one of the biggest challenges for us is we had 4 or 5 or 6 systems kind of sort of working together, sort of not, which let some things fall through the cracks that I wouldn't have liked to have happen. And then my org looked like this. We had a larger org, 92 people, not that many account managers, lots in customer success, lots in support, and we actually had a premier support offering as well. And so this org helped me sort of manage all points post-sale of the customer lifecycle. And so the final key takeaways are, upsells and cross-sells is where you can really take your growth to the next level. I mentioned that 33% of new business coming from the base over 40 million in revenue for your customer. Document, train, and sell the value of the machine itself, not just the fact that you can help one customer, but it's actually a sales benefit to be able to show to an executive, hey, listen, we know how to do this. We have a process that your customer can adopt. But don't ever underestimate the value of over communicating, and never stop storytelling, because at this scale, you have new people who've been only there 1 year, 6 months. They don't have that legend of lore back to the Club CSM days when we used to get together and have beers with 20 people. Don't stop the storytelling. It's critical to the success. And with that, I have one last anecdote to sort of round this off. Uh, there was one of my final sort of annual kickoff with sales. I was in the mode of saying I want to make sure that we really drive this storytelling piece forward. So we came up with a hashtag called "The Best Marketers in the World Use Eloqua," because at the core of it, what we realized was that people did this job because they really love working with specific people that they met in the sales process or the customer. And I asked the sales organization to let me know, tell me a story about someone they had met or sold to that they really admired. And I was surprised when 65 out of 70 sales reps sent me a long story, because with all due respect to anyone who's in sales on the phone, I thought that I'd get maybe 5 or 10. And as we went to the kickoff, what I did was I took 5 of the best ones and I went and asked the customer the same thing. What do you think about this salesperson? And they gave me, some called in voicemail, some did the whole thing, and they gave me a whole list of things of why they loved working with that salesperson. And when I unveiled this, I realized that it was back to the beginning. This core idea of these two people working together in this role of focusing on customer success was one of the key differentiators we had, and one of the reasons we were helping customers grow and be great with Eloqua. And it was emphasized with me at a special customer advocacy summit we had in Deer Valley, where I asked one of our top advocates. This is a guy who was helping driving referral sales, helping us support. Name was Mike Bernard. Why he did the things he did, and he said it's pretty simple. I will do anything Chad asked me to, who was our customer success manager. He helped. I took a risk on bringing you guys in, and he made sure I was not going to fail. And so now, when he asks me to do something, I do it. And so that reminded me that customers will get value and drive and come to you because of the quality of your sales organization, your product, but they stay because of the people you put in front of them. And with that, I wanted to thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. I'm going to pass it back to Jody. I will mention we will have time at the very end for some questions, so we'll look through those and get to those as well.
Wow, thank you, Paul. That was unbelievable. A just amazing, practical, step-by-step guide to building and growing a customer success team. And before we open up the floor for questions, I do want to take a moment to introduce you to our host today. This is Paul Philp. Paul is the founder and CEO of Amity, a customer success platform that helps SaaS companies get, keep, and grow their customers. Here you go, Paul.
Great. Thank you very much, Jody. And thank you very much, Paul. That was an amazing session. I have reams and reams of notes. I learned a ton, and I hope that's true of everybody. I wanted to take 2 minutes while Paul is having a glass of water to recover from all of that content, just to introduce Amity to everybody. Amity is a customer success platform. We focus on customer lifecycle automation, and we help our customers. We have over 50 customers around the world scale the customer success processes the way that Paul was talking about during his talk. And a customer comes into Amity and they look a lot like the situation on the left. Paul was talking about the 6 systems that didn't quite all work together. Our customers can have 4, 8, 10 different systems that don't work together: a ticketing system, a messaging system, a Dropbox, a billing system, a marketing automation system. So we help them get rid of that chaos and actually turn it into scalable business processes so that they can focus on the things that matter: upsell, referrals, renewals, onboarding. So we take all of that chaos and pain on the left and help people produce the results on the right. And there are 3 elements to the Amity platform. The customer intelligence, that's the integrated data warehouse where we bring your Salesforce or CRM data, marketing automation data, ticketing data, billing data, usage data from your product, and unique to Amity email, pull all of that together into a 360-degree view of your customer, and then feed that into our secret sauce as our smart playbooks. Smart playbooks let you build scalable, repeatable business processes that, depending on where your customer is at in their life cycle, recommend the right actions to take. And then we pull it all together with a collaboration layer so that all your CSMs are on one team, your teams are collaborating, and you can hand off the ball between customer success and professional services and support and not have the ball dropped, and everyone's playing for the same team, for the same cause. So that's the 2-minute introduction to Amity. Drop us a line if you'd like to find out more information. And now I'm going to turn it back to Paul so that we can get your questions answered.
Thanks, Paul. And now I'm going to take a quick look here and see what questions we have available online. The first is, will the deck be available after? And yes, we will make that available to everybody. There'll be a follow-up communication with that. The second is, what is a customer success platform? And I think good news story is that Paul just walked through what that kind of looks like, sort of a system of record for the CSM role and tracking all that customer data, having the workflow and the integration to make that happen. Then the next question here is, when do you start to standardize your customer success process? And I do think that the idea is that when you have if you're in sort of that phase 2, so 20 to 100 customers, you're still trying to prove value, you still want to be flexible. I'd say towards the end of that phase, you really want to start thinking about standardizing some of the things that you're learning repeats the success time and time and again for customers, so that when you get to that next phase of 1,000, 100 to 1,000, you can already run that machine through the process to scale it. So I would say towards the end of that second phase is when you really want to focus on it. Okay. Wow, there are a lot of questions here. Let me just keep going here. At what point did you have a separate onboarding team, and what types of value metrics did you have? So I would say it was, we probably had the CSMs for the first while. What I mean by that is, and until you're getting into sort of 50, 60, 70 customers who are doing a lot of the sort of services work as well. We established a professional services team after that, but we didn't force them to be profitable. So they were very flexible on being billable, and that separate onboarding team allowed us to scale as we ramped sales aggressively, because you needed them to be dedicated to just the onboarding process. What we learned later is that you also needed the CSM role during the onboarding to some extent. Otherwise, it would be fairly disconnected. You'd have sales, you'd have service, and then a CSM who didn't know what happened in the onboarding. And so we did layer CSMs as part of the communication owner through that process. In your nurture phase, so this is another question. In your nurture phase, how does the pool of CSMs work? So that was the 2x2 quadrant that had sort of nurture of customer segmentation: nurture, enterprise, strategic, and accelerate. The nurture phase, it was literally 3 or 4 or 5 CSMs that were not named to the customer, and the account manager could request them and pull them in to use on an account. And then once they were done with that task, they were brought back. And so there was a discipline around making sure they were never stuck with an account for a longer period of time than what we call a short project or short issue. And certainly we would alternate different CSMs so that no customer would have a favorite. Say, oh, I want Jason, or I want Anusha or something, because then you'd end up having sort of a pseudo-named CSM scenario anyways. Another one on the segmentation. In Accelerate, how do you ensure they stay when they only have a CSM for 10 weeks? Our SMB customers tend to be in Accelerate, but they also have a highest churn rate, so we keep CSMs with them for the entirety of their contract. It's a good question. I would say that could depend obviously on the product solution market you're in. But what we found is that if they didn't get value in the first 90 days, we had very little control of the renewal. And if we did, it was an all hands on deck, throw 5 people at it, give them a bunch of free stuff, renew them at 50% less. And you're almost wondering, is that better to let them go or renew them? And so the focus is that we learned that if a customer got successful in 90 days, their chances of renewal were extremely high, and it was better to put more resources there than spread it thinner over the entire lifespan for that accelerate segment. That did also mean, though, some discipline of if they weren't doing the things we needed them to, we would actually escalate back to the executive sponsor at the account and say, these things are not being done. You need to know that. And that did create some tension sometimes with customers who wanted to be sort of didn't want to surface they were having challenges to getting the implementation and onboarding stuff done. Here's another question. You mentioned willingness to let CSMs move out of into other roles within the org, like sales. How do you balance that with customer complaints about excessive turnover and the main point of contact for your company? That's a really good question. That's someone who's pretty insightful to ask that one, because the honest truth is that that challenge. I don't think we ever solved that challenge of customers complaining about change and turnover in the role. That being said, what happens anyways is if you have a CSM that's being sought after by sales and they want to go to sales and you don't let them go, or that they want to go to, say, product management, you will lose that person anyways. There are times we didn't do that, and eventually that CSM said, well, I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm going to go to a different business. So now what's happened is you're changing the role anyways, but that great CSM is now, all that knowledge and all that training has gone to another organization. And so yes, there is some challenge on the turnover, but it's better than losing that person to the market. Okay. We're going to answer a couple more questions here because there's some great ones here. Were your account managers part of the customer success org or sales? And what were the drawbacks of having AMs be part of the sales org? So I lived through the process of owning the account managers and then being changed over to the sales organization. And I will say that 2 things. One is, if you have account managers in the customer, I think you need to start them, in customer success. I think that any customer success leader needs to have a quota on them. I think it helps in terms of having a real seat at the table in terms of the strategic growth focus. I think that 2, it really, as a leader for me, it made me balance doing everything for the customer versus what's right for the business sometimes. And I think that's an important tension as a leader you want to have. When it moved to the sales org, we probably did it a little early at Eloqua. Ultimately, it's the right place because when you have enough product to sell or divisions to go after, you need some separation between the day-to-day challenges at a customer towards what's going to drive growth. And you want that separation. You want them not to be tied to all the issues. You want them to in some ways be separated from the issues so that they can ask bolder questions than your CSM would, or push harder for growth. And I think that's why eventually it ended up sales, and it's the right place. Another question: how do you distinguish between customer support and customer success? For me, at the start, there's a blend. They do a lot of support type work about the product, but I think where you want to divide the line is basically support is helping customers with actually using your product, things that are going wrong, things that they're not doing. Customer success is taking a step back and helping them with, the why and how they would use their product. Oh, you should apply to this type of program, or this. I've seen a customer do this over here. So they're never actually training a customer in any way, shape, or form on the product itself. They're actually focusing on the things that should be done to drive the business value they need. How do you recognize, here's another question, how do you recognize your CSMs company-wide? When the sales team closes big deals, the entire company knows about it, gongs off, etc. Are there ways to acknowledge CSMs in a similar way? Well, we may have been a little lucky on this point because I was there for so long, and we had the storytelling culture. But we did a couple things. One is, the entire company celebrated customer success through the stories of the customer, so that already was there. And so I'll give you an example. I think we had this thing called Eloquent of the Year, and I remember out of 4 years, 3 of them who won it were CSMs. And then ultimately, they actually got saluted. Our CEO did a great job of giving them awards at the annual kickoff, and then eventually they were actually invited to attend President's Club with the sales team. We didn't have that problem, but I could see that being a challenge. And I would say if you have that challenge, you need to put the customer voice first and tell those stories, and that will drive interest. And then your executive team will adopt some of those stories, and then they'll go see the customers, and the customers will say, here's the person who helped me. Here's the person who really drove the success. And that cycle, you have to do a lot of times, but it breeds that sort of focus on them. And then here, why don't we, maybe we'll just do 2 more questions here. Hi, just wondering whether you'd say this role varies at all based on the industry you're selling to, public versus private sector, for example. I do believe the role varies based on not just who you're selling to, but the business you're in yourself. If you go back to the very first 2x2 I showed you, it was all about the idea that if you had a fairly commoditized product, but we're doing a really good job at it, and it was a fairly mature market, the user experience should be the prime in customer success. And so, I will say at the end of Eloqua, we got into some verticalization, and it was and in some cases in a vertical segment, say you're taking a product down, let's call it, financial services or insurance, you're gonna need more of a focus on domain knowledge because of all the things that happen in that space that are regulatory, for example. And so I'd say you'd weight something like domain knowledge in that case more heavily than others. And so that would be one of the changes I would say. Okay. I'm going to ask this last one here. How technical should a CSM be? How do you differentiate between a TAM and a CSM? That's a good question. I will say this: if you've ever run TAMs or had the TAM role, you know what a TAM is because they come from a land where it's servers and pipes in the back end and data models and things. But let me give you a practical example of the difference between the CSM. We had a very strong CSM that was on an account called VMware. VMware was a $20 billion business. They paid us a lot of money. That CSM had to be smart enough to understand the technical nature and environment we were integrating into, so they wouldn't recommend things that were going to fall flat on their face. They had to also know that type of environment was similar to another customer, because if they recommended something in a very simple other customer, again, that would be a bad recommendation. That is different than a TAM who would say on HP, 50 divisions, 1,000 marketers globally, and they need to understand the data policies within their environment. They understand the speed requirements and SLAs between groups. They need to understand the tech stacks between the different organizations. And then when they say, well, how does Eloqua go from 1 division to 5 to 10? How does that scale? Do we approach it this way or that way? They can navigate that technical environment and give a technical recommendation to sometimes very senior marketing operations staff or a technical representative from IT. So that would be the two different. One is kind of making sure you don't recommend something that's going to blow up in your face versus actually providing architecture and infrastructure recommendations. And with that, we've wrapped up the hour. I wanted to thank everyone for attending. And as we mentioned, Amity will be following up everyone with access to the webinar. And I would like to pass back to Jody here for one last thing.
Thanks everybody for attending, and Paul, once again, an enormous thank you for being here and sharing your expertise with us. Particularly the Q&A was, phenomenal. We just want to let you know that you can continue the conversation. You can connect with Paul at his handle Teshima on Twitter, and certainly invite you to check out Paul's new endeavor called Nudge at Need Nudge, which is a social selling app that allows you in ways you never have been able to do before to leverage your networks. And if you'd like to reach us at Amity, and I hope you will, we're at Get Amity. That's our handle, or getamity.com. I also want to just let you know that this was the first in our series of our practical customer success webinars. The next one is scheduled for October 7th. We've got Kate Leggett from Forrester Research, who's going to present on smart processes for customer success. And before you sign off, if you've got an extra moment, we'd really appreciate your feedback. There's a survey question coming on things that you'd like to see us cover in the future. So thank you all so much for your time. Looking forward to seeing you the next go round. And please, please stay in touch. Thanks again, everybody. Thanks again, Paul, Teshima, and Paul Philp.